I often talk about roller coasters at the start of these recap videos, but never has that analogy been more apt than this season. Insanely, we have once again qualified for the Club World Cup by virtue of that Champions League final from about 3 years ago, so we're going to be doing that over on stream right now, along with a whole host of transfer business, so of course join us over there after you've caught up over here. VODs are on the second channel. You know that by now. So we came into season 18 of Building a Nation with Sirens of Malta off the back of what could be said is a fabulous season for the entire country. It was the second best points haul that we'd had in the entire save, getting over 15 points. And we hope to build on that this season as well, knowing that we were going to be losing one of the worst seasons that we've had so far since we reached the sensible level. Unfortunately, we did have the other hurdle of having Zabar in Europe with us this year, who for me just simply weren't ready. So could we drag them along for the ride? It has been an absolutely enormous year for us as far as transfers out, raking in nearly £180 million of transfer fees, and that is just not a number I thought I'd be saying at this stage. But before we get to any of that sort of stuff, I did just want to address something up front here, because I think there might have been a couple of misconceptions, and I think I am responsible for this, let's be honest. And that is that I think some of you may be confused about some of the aims of this save that maybe have hopped in midway through. Totally understandable. And that is quite simply that we are not trying to influence and improve the level of the national team in this save. If that happens, it's a wonderful byproduct of that, but it's not the overall goal. I only actually started showing the national team updates because people were curious about it, and frankly, it's been kind of an interesting story to follow. But we're not going to be taking over the national team or anything like that. This is solely about building up the League of Malta to be the best in Europe, because national team management is just very tedious, unfortunately. I would really like to see that change. And with the way that dynamic youth rating works in FM, and I say works in very loose terms, it's basically we'd be fighting a losing battle. But there we go. And before we talk about any new arrivals, it's time to actually focus on those players that have left the club that generated all of that money for us. And the biggest one is Seydou Kwasi Awua, who left to join Manchester City for £126 million. Now, was this a transfer that I wanted to make? No, but we were sort of forced into it, both partly through him, partly through me. Essentially, I'd let his contract run down far too low, and when I tried to extend it, he became a bit of a bellend and essentially was like, no, I couldn't possibly do such a thing. So essentially, he found himself with 1 year left on his deal after we'd been trying to extend it for a full year, and we basically had to sell him or we'd lose him for free at the end of the season, and I was not about to let that happen. So in a way, I think it's actually worked out quite well, because we've managed to receive £126 million for an albeit excellent player, but a player that had 1 year left on his deal and we were literally going to lose for free, and we've come out of it like absolute bandits. Particularly, as you'll note from his appearances this season, he has started a grand total of 1 game for Manchester City after they spent over £100 million on him. Another huge out was that of Djibril Fall, who's left to join Paris Saint-Germain. Now, if you recall, he was the goalkeeper we got very, very cheap from Malta, only was here for a good 4 seasons, and it's interesting that he actually played the exact same number of games for us in the league that he did for Malta. PSG gave us £42.5 million for him. Now, there is a reason why we did this with Gibby, and that was obviously because of the arrival of Gutierrez, who I believe was last season. He may have even been this summer, actually, but I don't believe he was. We basically had a backup goalkeeper who was way too good to be a backup and was worth a lot of money. And you'll note, he has not made a single appearance for Paris Saint-Germain in any competition this season. Oh my God. I have not even looked at that yet. So we basically raked in nearly £180 million for players that literally are not playing for the clubs they've gone to. I could see us loaning him back at some point or getting him back on a free at some point as well. This is just business. The last out was Nayash Villarreal. Now, this was a simple one we'd always had planned. The plan was to bring him in for a couple of seasons, get a couple of his prime years out of him, which we very much did, and I think he was an excellent servant to the club in those 2 years, and then move him on for big money when the opportunity arose. The opportunity arose, and we were offered £15.5 million by Al Gharafa. He's actually only on 55 grand a week here, which is wild to me, but £15.5 million for a guy that joined us on a free transfer when we had other players around the club that we were more than happy to step in. We felt that he was just going to be declining from pretty much here on out. It was the perfect time to sell and just give us even more money. Now, of course, with the way that FFP works, you kind of need to spend a little bit of that money in that first season, because otherwise you find yourself in a situation where you've got all this money coming in 1 year, but if you then spend it the following year, there's a crossover point in the FFP where all of a sudden you're just spending loads of money according to the game in FFP, which means we have to kind of stay on top of that as we fall into that trap once before in FM, and it's a bad time. You can get banned from Europe. First up, we have Paul Hussein, who joins us from Simba over in Tanzania. Tanzania have been generating some really interesting players in this save, and I believe that he is another one of those. He's on loan at Zabar this season, which is kind of helpful for them. Hasn't really played a lot, and I believe it might have actually been a January move for him, in fairness, but it's a nice one to bring in. Also, if you do run into that issue where for some reason it's not showing the CA or PA, someone pointed out to me, if you just hit Scout Report, then come back, it does then show them. Good times. We also dropped £6.5 million on Filip Karalic from Crvena Zvezda, because of course we did. It's Red Star, you've got to sometimes. Point point is, we think he's a fabulous young midfielder. Not going to be homegrown for us, but he does have 2 Serbia caps. Has played a little bit this season in various midfield roles for us, but he's just an all-round good player. Maybe we overspent a little bit, but he's still got a great value, and we're quite happy with the signing. Next up was one we're very pleased with. Roberto Santamaria from Cadiz. Over in Spain. He had a £4 million release clause, and one of the things I love about Spanish players and finding Spanish players is that sometimes, you know, they're great, but they've got insane release clauses. They're ridiculously high. But sometimes you can get incredible bargains for young players in Spain that have relatively low release clauses. And the thing about him is we were worried that his potential might be a bit of a lie, and we're still not sure. But the fact is he has held steady at 5-star potential ever since he's joined us. He's done well. He's been on loan at Slima, hasn't actually played for them yet, but I believe he is a 2-year loan, so we'll have to see how that goes with him. But he may end up coming back if he's not playing. Still, I think he's a good piece of business. Great for the loan farm. Now we come to a signing I'm very pleased with. This is Miguel Delgado. Now, albeit slightly older of the compared to some of the other players we've picked up, but we felt that for £1.6 million to get a guy of this kind of quality, who is just a really solid squad player that can sit in that midfield and play a decent number of games this season, not a huge amount of games, but for that kind of price, it was almost impossible to turn down, because if nothing else, he's got potential for a huge resale value at something. In fact, he's actually wanted by someone right now. Who is that team? In fact, it's Al Nassr. If we could get like 15 million for him potentially, even this summer, that for me would be a fantastic little flip to just do 10x our profit in one transfer window. That would be wild. We also finally took the punt on Argentinian international Mateus Bossio. Now, he has fake caps. Basically in the sense that he has 2 Argentina caps, but they're not his. So basically on FM24, IDs can get reused by players that are retired. And essentially what has somehow happened is that a player from a really small nation played a couple of caps for a country, retired, and then he took their ID due to some weird sort of crossover thing, and he ended up with 2 Argentina caps, which we know were not possible, because when it says he got the caps, they literally didn't have international matches. Those matches didn't exist. So basically, we were a bit worried that maybe he's not as good as we think, but he has held on to that 5-star potential. He does have a major injury right now, but for £7 million, we still thought that he's a brilliant option for the future for us. And the reason we know as well, by the way, is that he apparently got his international debut against El Salvador when literally Argentina didn't have a game that day against El Salvador. I think it was actually Puerto Rico that played them that day. We also picked up Tyler Chicken because his name is Tyler Chicken. I'm not going to say anything more on that. We then dropped quite large money on Jesus Garcia, the Mexican international, and I'm not sure if this was the right piece of business for us, honestly. He's on quite a large amount of cash these days, and I think he's the kind of guy that I may look to try to move on this summer, even if we only end up breaking even, because he wasn't able to fit into certain squads, and we maybe wasn't quite as good as we thought, and we just wanted a little bit more depth in the DM role, as well as being able to cover wing-back, even if he doesn't have the crossing ability. Now, he is wanted by Arsenal, interestingly, so I wonder if we could get a bidding war going with those guys, and maybe get, like, I don't know, any profit is good profit at this stage, particularly with that wage that is very high for our squad. We also signed up Eurico Luis, and the main reason I'm showing you here is because he's another one of those players that we took a random punt on who didn't seem to have particularly high PA, but some of his attributes looked kind of okay, and upon joining us, it started to climb, which means that potentially our scouts were wrong initially, and he's from Mozambique, and having a Mozambican player who could potentially be quite interesting, I just think is kind of fun. So there's Eurico Luis. You may well see more from him later in the save, who knows, but high value as well, insane value for free. And now one we're very excited about. This is Alexander Lacharak. Now, he actually came through a recruitment focus, but I hadn't spotted him, and chat went, that guy, please, let's have a little look. And we picked him up for £775,000 from Borat's, and I think he could potentially be our future starting goalkeeper one day, if that potential holds, and the value is enormous, which is brilliant. He's already got a cap for Bosnia at the age of, I think it was 18 when he got that cap. He has a lot of things I like. Now, the things that let him down for me, the one-on-ones is not great. That goes without saying. His command of area, though, is brilliant. Area reach is really solid as well. Not amazing on some of the physical things, but he's got good jumping reach and stuff like that. Reasonable personality, I suppose. And he's not too bad. The one-on-ones are a little bit low. The reflexes aren't great either. We are going to get him working on that. And I think if he does have any kind of potential, we could try and mold him into someone, because Gutierrez won't be able to be here forever. And I feel like Lacharak could potentially be the next guy in waiting for him, especially for that price. That's a bargain. We also dropped £6 million on Ariel Alvarez, who I think is a relatively poor signing for us, honestly. I think he's pure attributes, but he is also a mercenary, doesn't seem to have the value that we thought he might do, and his potential is nowhere near as high as we thought either. He's also a little older. He's the kind of guy that I think we might look back on and be like, that's a disappointment. On the other hand, Tala Jiao from who else but Generash on foot feels to me like the exact opposite of that. 160 grand, brilliant, immediately got massive value, immediately gone on loan for the second half of the season to Balsan Youth. Hopefully next year he can stay there and get a little bit more football under his belt, but I think there's definitely something here, and he's already got under 20 caps for Senegal. I think he's a shoo-in for a Senegalese international cap very, very soon. And we also dropped, and this is probably one of our worst potential transfers, Juan Pablo Paz. £12.5 million on him. We were just kind of going, actually, you know what, we'll have him, because we had all the quasi money, but you can see that we signed him purely based on his attributes. He doesn't seem to have much of a ceiling beyond where he currently is, but he might be the kind of guy that perhaps because Spanish, maybe Barca would want him back, someone else in Spain, I think we could still get a lot of money for him in a few years, potentially, but I'm not sure he's got that much room to grow, potentially. That's the downside of him, sadly. But I think he's a very good player in terms of what he currently has, which could still be useful if we can find a loan for him. And it was a similar story with Gabriel Martinez. £4.5 million from Young Boys. Just a solid midfielder, very, very well-rounded, great physicals, relatively well-rounded, but like mid-technicals and really nice mentals. And I felt like it was one of these players that we could pretty much just flip for profit, and that's probably the aim with Martinez. He's not amazing, has still played a decent amount of games overall. Obviously, most of that wasn't for us, but in fact, almost all of these games weren't for us. You see, he played like 14 games in the Champions League. I don't think he was even in our squad in the Champions League, so that was all for Young Boys. And the last one, genuinely for me, feels like an absolute bargain. This is Matthias de Potter. He's not just a Potter, he's the Potter. £4.2 million from Fortuna Sittard. Belgian international, really, really well-rounded. Now, obviously, he's got a lot of stuff down on this at the moment, but I think he's been like the bargain of this season, potentially. To get a guy at 3.5-star CA level in our squad, like I'm always saying about how it's really difficult for us to find first-team players because most of our guys develop in our system and then become first-team players, and most of the guys that are good enough to slot straight in won't sign for us in the first place because they're already at elite sides. He kind of bucked the trend a little bit on that. We could have actually had him for free, but I was afraid that he would just end up signing for a Saudi club if we started going into approach to sign situations. So we paid the money, got him in, and I think he's had a solid second half of the season, really. You know, 8 appearances for us anyway, 2 off the bench as well. 3 goals and 5 assists from midfield is pretty bloody good. But you'll see there's a lot of players have joined us this summer. Some ups, some downs. No like massive signings, but there is one more I do want to show you who's a little bit expensive, but is the epitome of a player who is just pure attributes. And this is he. This is Albi Arifi. He's a 20-year-old Kosovan international who we bought off of Basel, or we will be about to buy off Basel, for £8.5 million. Now, it's crazy to me that he's 20, but he has 19 finishing already. He's got 19 pace. Weirdly, only 14 acceleration, which is kind of odd to go with that. Insane agility, ridiculous mentals in some very crucial areas for a striker. The rest of his striker temp balls aren't amazing, but we wanted to just see what this guy would actually be like, because we just can't believe that he's as bad as the game is telling us that he is. Now, he may well be, but either way, I think he's just got pure match engine vibes, and we do like a bit of that. There was a lot of other players that were joining us in the summer as well, but I will show you those guys in the next season, because we spent at least another £20 million on guys that are going to be joining us, including like 4 or 5 million here or there as well.
Oh god, she's milking the shit out of it. Now, Pog, I'm not a dairy cow, but feel free. No, don't finish that sentence.
So this season, there has actually been some tactical changes that we made midway through the season. We actually moved away from our more aggressive tactical approach. Now, this looks very similar, you might note, but actually, we've moved our central midfielders back to being DMs, and we feel like it's given us a lot more defensive base behind there. We had to make a lot of changes this year in terms of tactical stuff, but you'll see that there's definitely some more changes. The Trequartistas are gone. They were just being carried far too much when we were off the ball, and it was costing us dearly. So we've now moved over to an advanced playmaker and a pressing forward, which we do really like the look of. When Padilla's fit, unfortunately, he's injured at the moment, he would operate in the advanced forward role often with Reynoso playing on the right-hand side because they've got the work rate. Both he and Perez have brilliant work rate, and it really, really helps. But other than that, not a lot of things have really changed via the instructions. The only thing we're doing a little bit more of, perhaps, is we're no longer like focusing our play so much, and we're dribbling a lot more than we were before. And it feels like that's really helping us win penalties and fouls to just get good positions. But now it's time to talk about the league, which we annihilated this season. Easily our biggest sort of league win in terms of the gap for a very long time. 20 points with a plus 93 goal difference. We equaled our record scoring as well with 112 this year. No defeats, still not hit that invincible season. Sorry, like flawless season. I don't think we ever will, just because of random fluctuations. It's almost impossible, particularly with how much better the other sides are getting. They're not the pushovers they once were. You can see Sweetie really easily in second place there, plus 28 goal difference. They very much, them and Hamron really, are very much the second best teams, or second and third best teams in this league. Hamron have had a much better year this year under new management too, which has really helped them. Birkirkara as well, doing a very good job up in 4th place, so they're back into Europe, but I trust them. They've got some good players, especially Kieran Warner, who's been on loan at Birkirkara for the last couple of seasons. I think it's the last 2 years, in fact, but this year has been a real breakout for him, and to have this level of quality out on loan is scary. Crazy that he's not got any Sweden caps yet. Zabar will also join them in there, unfortunately, for their second attempt at Europe after being in there last year as well. Good job. This year we couldn't save them by throwing them the cup. We even tried to throw a league game to them, and this is what happened.
There's bodies in the box, simple tapping needed, and he's going to drive all the way through and finish this past Potter, and he's missed the... Finds Kernaz, right? He's got bodies around him. Radincic is in again. Oh, this is like watching a man drown while you're dying of thirst. Oh, now we go and score the winner in the 90th minute or something. Oh my god, we nearly did. What a save from the goalkeeper. We nearly scored, but now can Panasio win it in the 97th minute? No, he can't.
they just cannot be helped. Valletta and Floriana straight back down again. We're going to have to get used to that. Also, Reynoso, top scorer in the league with 26 this season, which is a record. That is the record goal scoring for anyone in this division, breaking a record set by Lucas Marza in, I think it was season 3 of this save. It was like 15 or 16 years ago that record stood till, and Reynoso's busted through it this year, and that's a lot when you consider that he's literally our starting striker in the Champions League and European games too. To get this many goals in the league is hideously good. In the second tier, it's Nashar and Melita. Melita finally do get themselves promoted this time. Abdelhamid Kamal bangs another nearly 30 goal season. He's been insane for them over the last couple of years, so they do get their passage back to the top flight, which then brings us to us in Europe. Now, we had what you might say is a harder schedule this year than last year, especially with a lot of the easier games being the ones away from home where there's potential banana skins, and it was just an all-round tougher schedule for us. But it was one that got off to an absolute flyer, where incredibly, Ilan Jozanovic scored a hat-trick from centre-back, 2 goals from corners, and then a penalty, because it was obviously going to the third taker, in there, gave us the 4-0 victory over Bayer Leverkusen, an own goal in there too. Pretty much the perfect start to our Champions League campaign, exactly what we wanted to see. Life without Kwasi was beginning, but we felt that it was absolutely going to be fine. We'd moved Padilla up to be in one of the striker roles now, and we were operating with Pebbles in behind, as you can see in here. This was the ideal lineup for us pretty much, with Alberto playing a lot in that role on the left. Then we got a little bit of luck to go our way. Away at Liverpool, it was a frustrating as hell game. It's weird coming away from a game where we've got a very lucky 2-2 draw and still feeling aggrieved just because of some of the things that were going on in this match.
He chose to give us a reprieve there. What was that? Why are you throwing it straight? It's right, they're going to score off of this instead, though.
But Liverpool definitely deserved more out of this match, so we take the very important draw, but we didn't look particularly good in this game, and this was a sign of things to come. Though not immediately, as we pulled off another absolutely brilliant victory, this time against Paris Saint-Germain. Reynoso and Henry Watara getting the goals. Henry off the bench, just casual as ever this season, was brilliant. Palacio was fantastic as well. Again, I think we were fortunate in this game. A draw would have been a fairer result, so we definitely had a stroke of luck in a couple of matches, which is exactly what we'd needed. But I'm always wary when that does happen, when we're not seeing great stuff elsewhere. You just worry that, oh, you're just getting luck at this point, and that is a concern, especially as we were then immediately humbled in possibly the worst way imaginable, losing 5-1 at home to a Monaco side that hadn't been in the Champions League, I don't think, for years in this save. We were the better side on the night and lost 5-1. Kamga and Lend also got his yearly injury, where we're genuinely concerned that he may just be disappearing off to Cameroon because it's his sister's birthday. It's the 3rd year in a row that he's basically got injured in like the same day.
3 years in a row. 12th of November, hip injury. Out for 2 months. Following year, 6th of November, hip injury. Out for 3 months. This year, 6th of November, sprained knee ligaments. Out for, I think, 8 weeks. Something's fishy going on, Kamga.
Then against Bayern, it got worse. Now, Bayern are a tough side, obviously. Away from home, we just didn't really have much to offer. And you'll note as well, we actually played a different system in this game because we were starting to get the idea that perhaps our current tactical setup was not ideal. We actually moved back to our old system, hoping it would make a better result for us, and it just really didn't. Now, there's an element of tactical familiarity there, I suspect, but still, we did not look good, and we were starting to get a little bit worried all of a sudden. But we did get a bright spot, though, at home against Arsenal, in what I'd say was a fair draw in the end. Miguel Delgado bailed us out after Arsenal had taken a lead. We played pretty well in this game, so we were looking a little bit better at home, played back to our old sort of style of play, and got, I'd say, what is pretty much, I'd say, a fairly closely deserved point, but still a little bit concerning, because that actually left us with 8 points after only 6 matches, meaning that we were actually still on the cusp. Luckily, after Christmas, we had Shakhtar and Partizan away, hopefully giving ourselves a chance to get some points going again, back up, hopefully into the top half, and kind of cruise through from there. Unfortunately, Football Manager had other ideas, as we then conceded to Shakhtar's first 3 shots of the match. And we were 3-0 down inside 24 minutes here and wondering what on earth was going on. We then did switch some tactics over and actually tried something different, started getting back into this game, but we just could not stop conceding goals. 5 goals conceded off of 6 shots on target. To concede 5 goals off of less than 2 XG as well was hideous. Reynoso did try his best to bail us out here, but it was an absolute disaster fest. And that left us in a really massive pickle. We only had 8 points from 7 games. We were currently sitting just about in the top 24, knowing that if we went away to Partizan, we needed at least a point to actually qualify for the knockout rounds of the Champions League. Otherwise, we'd be relying on results elsewhere. Yeah. And then somehow we lost 3-1 to Partizan as well. We could not believe our eyes here. It was another very even game, and it shouldn't have been an even game either. This is not a very good side, and the fact that we were this poor against them really did cause me a lot of trouble. And the fact that we lost 3-1, we were going into stoppage time, literally in 25th place, and not even going to qualify for the knockouts. I might have got sacked, but if it wasn't for the saviour of all saviours, Atletico Madrid, scoring 2 late goals against Atalanta, which was enough to see them leapfrog us, but also leapfrog Atalanta, and dropping us above them and into the, I think it was the final qualification spot, and we got through with 8 points, which is usually not doable. As you'll see, in the end, 24th place in the end, just the 2 wins, 2 draws, 4 defeats, 8 points, and we survive essentially on goal difference to Atalanta. Were it not potentially for that extra goal goal that Atleti had scored, we may well have gone out on goals scored. I'm not entirely sure. No, we would have probably got through on goals scored, but it was very, very bloody close, and that's about as close as I ever want to cut it ever again. When you consider that if we got those 14 points, we'd be somewhere up here, just chilling, absolutely vibing. Very, very strange season. We were in deep, deep trouble, and at that point, I tore up the tactics book, and that's where we came up with this other solution with the two DMs instead, but they're still quite attacking roles. But naturally, of course, that meant we would then have to go to the knockouts very early, and against one of the better sides in this little clump of teams here, and would you know it, we drew Barcelona, because that's nice and easy, isn't it? And then we pulled this off. A Jose Padilla hat-trick at home against Barcelona. Now, this was just before we moved over to the 2DM system. We moved back to our old system because we felt that it was more effective against better or equal quality sides, and it showed off here. We annihilated them here. This was an absolutely dream performance. No shots on target for Barca. I mean, just incredible. 3 goals for Padilla. Cruising through, and we just felt so confident after that we had a great chance to take them to the Nou Camp and actually get a result, which sadly we didn't, but it wasn't for the want of trying, and it still didn't matter because we did progress through. We took the lead through Uri Lahovi after 25 minutes, cruising 4-0 up, easy as you like. They got a penalty, which was not a penalty, but that's just how life goes. They then got another penalty, which wasn't a penalty. I hate seeing these penalties where the ball is kicked out way far in front of the player. Your player just walks across, takes the ball cleanly into the giant space. The player falls over like 2 yards away and it's given as a foul. It's super annoying. I know it looks different in 2D, but you know, at the end of the day, if the 3D can't match the 2D, it's not fit for purpose. So it's very frustrating to see that. And then an own goal as well. It was just a catastrophe of a day. Possibly could have done better if it wasn't for those 2 penalties as it goes, but that is how things go. We got through, and that's massive because we really needed that. Gutierrez was delightful in this game. But that would then set up a round of 16 tie against Liverpool. Not an easy opponent at all. But then, oh baby, the magic continued. Sirens 2, Liverpool 1, and it just felt like we were all of a sudden back. Reynoso had given us the lead. Fabio De Santis had got a goal for Liverpool in really annoying circumstances, but it is what it is. One of those ones where your players just continually give the ball back to them, miss every tackle, ball goes through their legs, etc, etc. It happens, right? And then Ouattara made it 2-1 to us in the 87th minute with a defensive lapse from Liverpool that was almost equally as bad to give us a huge 2-1 victory, but we just didn't feel like a 2-1 victory at home was going to be enough to battle them at Anfield. And in the end, it did prove to be exactly that. Another own goal, just incredible, from Drama Fofana, who'd had to come on for an injured, who was it that got injured? I think it was Kadri early in this game, gave Liverpool an early lead right on the stroke of half time as well, which was very disappointing. We missed some absolute sitters with Reynoso and Vidazinha. In the latter stages, Liverpool got one back from, got the one that put them ahead. The go-ahead goal, if you like, through De Santis. We then pushed. Martinez then grabbed another one for them and pumped us out of the Champions League by 4-2. But I felt like all of a sudden, we felt like we were on the right track again. We were actually starting to match a lot of these sides in games now, being able to win against them at home, looking better away, and we tried a new tactic in this game, which was working quite well if it wasn't for those little lapses in concentration, and I do believe we're on the right track now, and hopefully we never have to deal with a season like this again. But you can certainly see what I mean from the roller coaster to nearly going out of the tournament entirely to then going through and beating Barcelona, and we haven't even got into the other Maltese sides yet, which is exactly what we're about to do.
That is the second season in a row that Hamron have gone out to on penalties to Dingley or Zuri. They didn't have a single shot and they won. Dingley won on penalties without having a shot.
So this year in Europe, we had the added hurdle of having to bring Zabar with us, who I did not feel were ready for Europe, and they'd have to go into the Conference League qualifiers, which meant they basically had no chance. But then they pulled off a miracle, pulling back a ridiculous result against Luzern to go through on penalties, then knocking out Trabzonspor before falling at the final hurdle against Fiorentina. And the fact is, they managed to beat Fiorentina 4-2 in Malta before losing 3-0 in Italy. They were this close to actually knocking out one of the big Italian sides in Europe, and that is incredible scenes. Shame they didn't get to the group stages though, and that would cost us points naturally. So it's a real shame, and it's a shame they're going to be back in Europe again. But next we had Goodyear in the playoff round of the Europa League, and they actually made a fairly easy time of it against Danish side Brøndby to get themselves into the Europa League group stages, which is just nice to see that kind of progression, albeit straight from the playoff round with not an easy tie, but a tie they made late work of. Next we had Hamron, who had by far the hardest route as far as qualifying, given that they started in the second qualifying round, but then absolutely smashed Fenerbahce 5-0 on aggregate before a much more scrappy affair against Boavista, seeing them win 1-0 on aggregate, but then home and away victories against Standard Liège to put themselves through to the group stages of the Europa League, with Facundo Pereira absolutely killing it in his second year of his loan spell at Hamron. He's been integral to them this season. But that then suddenly gave us 2 teams in the group stages of the Europa League, even though no one in the Conference League. That's always a bad thing. That left us with the last competitor. That, of course, was Sweet Eat United, and they would start in the Champions League qualifiers. Now, we saw Hamron go flying through those last season. Wasn't expecting the same thing to happen again, but Besiktas were relatively light work for Sweet United, actually getting a win away from home in Turkey to progress. Then things were much easier for them as they faced Elfsborg of Sweden to put themselves into the final playoff round of the Champions League. And when we saw them draw Dynamo Kiev, we thought, screw it, they've got a chance here. Unfortunately, they didn't actually score a goal themselves in the entire tie and did have to make do with dropping into the Europa League. But that meant 3 teams in the Europa League groups this year. A bit of a new experiment for us, really, to see how that would actually go. Had high hopes for Sweetie and Hamron especially. Unfortunately, it didn't entirely work out that way for all of them. As you'll see, Sweetie ended up coming 25th. Really disappointing, this one. Like, they got results against Red Bull Salzburg and Sparta Prague. Good stuff. Draws with Nantes and Marseille. Very good. It's the defeats. Losing to Shamrock Rovers, losing to CSKA Sofia. Those two are just not acceptable defeats to have. Frankly, they can't be doing that. And that ended up putting them with 8 points. They actually only went out on goals scored against Antalyaspor too, which is really disappointing. One more point in there would have done the trick for them, but sadly no. Goodyear, on the other hand, surprise package, honestly, qualified before any of the other teams as it goes. Got 4 wins on the board. HJK, Sparta Prague, Gladbach and Olympiacos, draws against Valencia and Tirana, who actually did surprisingly well, and then lost to Roma and Red Bull Salzburg. But that's what you'd expect. 14 points, fair play. Hamron, on the other hand, also got 14 points, but even better, Nordsjælland, Ajax, Legia Warszawa, Victoria Pilsen with the wins there. Got draws against Tirana, again, who are very, very good as it goes. And then Roma as well. A draw at home to Roma is nothing to be sniffed at. And then Olympiacos and Valencia. The Olympiacos at home game is the one that they maybe will rue a little bit, but still, top 8 in the Europa League for Hamron is wild. And fair play to Tirana of Albania, not only getting into the Europa League group, but actually qualifying into the knockouts. Now, Goodyear, of course, by qualifying in the top 16 means they had to play one of the sides from down here, but there's some quite strong sides in here, and they got probably the strongest of the bunch, Newcastle. And it went about as well as you could expect, really. A 2-0 defeat at St James's Park. Note here, Tirana beating Wolfsburg, by the way. Just thought I'd share that with you. In the second leg, Goodyear did unfortunately go out, but they did go down swinging. A good draw against them at home, wins more points for Malta, which is the most important thing. Unfortunately, Tirana couldn't quite get it over the line in the second leg because of that red card, but they were literally winning the tie until they got that red card. It's like, for crying out loud, lads. But that, of course, meant that Goodyear were out and Newcastle would progress. Also note the Battle of Celtic and Shamrock Rovers. Just, I love that as a tie. It didn't go so well for Shamrock Rovers, sadly. So that means Hamron would await in the next round, but who would they face? Yeah, they'd face Newcastle, because of course. But then it happened. They got a brilliant draw away at St James's Park with a goal from Jefferson Pinedo, which set up a brilliant home tie, which Hamron actually won. They beat Newcastle United in the Europa League. Vrabel, who'd just gone on loan in January, Admilson Silva, and Yunus Al Amrani, who is moving to Hamron permanently at the end of the season for £5 million, which is going to be very, very interesting indeed. They knocked Newcastle out of the Europa League, but they would then draw Gladbach, who'd admittedly only just scraped past Celtic. But once they got that home draw, we just felt like it was going to be an uphill struggle from there. Pereira, of course, the king of the Europa League, was actually the top scorer in the Europa League in the entire tournament this year, won the Golden Boot, but Isak Yildirim's goal cancelled him out. On the return leg to Germany, it wasn't quite enough, as Gladbach got the 2-1 victory. Hassan Al-Kamaji, who'd gone back on another loan spell, unfortunately, he's once again had that cancelled once more, so he'll be back at the club again this summer. We'll see if we can get him back to Hamron yet again, because they just love him there. But that, of course, was the end of the road for Hamron, and of course the end of the road for all the Maltese sides in Europe. But what doesn't sound that good is pretty good. 14.3 points on the year. If you just sort it by the yearly score, we are sitting at, what's that, 7th place on the year, which is exactly where we want to be. It's a good year. It's nearly 6 points gained over what we were losing as well, which takes us to 69 points on the dot. And if that isn't perfect, I don't know what is. Can I get a nice? But more importantly, it actually moves us above the Dutch. We now go 1.9 points above the Dutch, and next season we're going to gain even more points to really start gapping them, because if you look, next year, 8.5 points. That's easily the worst year we've got on here that's about to disappear. If we can just put down a 14, 15 point season, and I really feel like next year we can, there's going to be huge gains. The sort of gains that could start catching us up to Portugal, because we're going to gain like 6 points over them without even doing anything. And if we could just put down a really good year, we could start to properly get into that battle now with Portugal for 6th place, albeit that could all potentially go away when that 18.5 season gets lost. But we want to get as far ahead of the Dutch, Denmark, Croatia, teams like that as possible before that happens, because we know that's going to be a problem season for us no matter what, and we've got to make sure we're well placed to deal with it. That brings me to the youth intake, and frankly, the youth intake this year was more of a youth outtake, so really I have nothing to show you. However, switching topics slightly, I often get asked about the facilities of clubs in the league, and the last time we sort of checked in about this was about 5 years ago, where there was really nothing to report. And I thought, screw it, I'll have another little look around and see if there was any changes, and boy golly, there have been. So let's talk about that. You can see here that Sweetie obviously have actually made a lot of changes a little bit of a while ago. They haven't really done much, but other clubs very much have. Valzan have been very, very busy. In the last 5 years, they've made 4 different separate youth and training facilities upgrades. They are cooking. Birkirkara have done 2 of them in the last 5 years. Hamron as well have been surprisingly busy, considering they're one of the better sides themselves, but look, 1 there, 3 more in consecutive seasons as well. They've also increased their stadium capacity to 14.5, which is more than us, by the way, although we are extending our stadium by a mere 140 seats. I think it's 140, might be 450. Either way, it's not a lot. It's costing us 60k. We're just bringing in a temporary stand, I can feel it. Iberians have also done a couple of them. And with those changes to Hamron, you can see they're now at 14 and 16, which is nothing to be sniffed at. That's a really good amount. If they can just keep going on that, I'd be very interested to see what they can do. Switching gears towards the stats themselves, Reynoso has had the year. Now, last year I said I wanted him to try and match what he did last year, and I feel like he has done. 32 goals. I think that's actually more goals than last year. Less assists, but that will come from the fact that he was playing a slightly different role in much of the second half of the year after we switch over to the tactic, because he was operating as the pressing forward, so maybe a few less assists for him there. But still, 41 goal contributions in 33 starts. Sensational. Well above his XG as well, which is what we like to see. Henry was goated this year. As a backup striker that only started 12 games for us, albeit a lot of substitute appearances, 23 goals is wild. An 18 XG. It's incredible how good Henry actually is to have around the club. Like, he's never going to be a starter for us, particularly in big games, but he's so useful and so reliable. Padilla, despite a few injuries, did end up with 15 goals and 7 assists. Very nice to see as well. Perez just underperforming. He just continues to be a disappointment. And it's a real shame because he's so good attribute-wise, but just cannot seem to get it together. Maybe now that he can play as a pressing forward because he's got the work rate, we may see a slightly different version of him next season over a full year. I don't know. Jozanovic was brilliant. 7 goals from centre-back this year is brilliant to see as well. The Creamy also, our experiment of playing a right-footed player on the left wing-back spot, but not as like an inverted wing-back, seems to have drawn some blood. 5 goals, 9 assists. Not bad at all for La Creamy, who's become quite an integral part of the team. As far as assists go, it's been more spread out this year. Krastev still cream of the crop, I suppose, with 11. Vida's contributed a lot less this season because he's barely played with 3 assists. He is 32, not really getting the game time that he once was. Sawashnig, only 4 assists this year, but he has been training to play on the other side as well, so it's been a bit of a transition year for him. But just a few less assists coming from the right-hand side in general. The left-hand side, on the other hand, very different story, because you can see La Creamy, 9 assists. Palacio, 9 assists. Lahovi, 7 assists. Between them, they've got like 25 assists playing down that left-hand side of the defence. When you look at the number of matches they've played, it makes a lot of sense that that would be the case. So very, very happy with the way things are going on that side of things. A couple of players to highlight. It would be silly if I didn't highlight Reynoso again, because every single time I show you him, it feels like he gets better, and it's just been a steady upward trajectory now to the point where he's 4.5 stars. He's 20 years old. If he has close to full potential, which, okay, fair enough, I still think there's more to come from him. But even if he's as good as this, I just really like him all round. From a progress standpoint, you can see that he's just made lovely gains across his entire game, basically. I still think he can get a lot better, but we will see. He's got a long way to go to be on the level of Padilla as far as technicals. Padilla's one letdown, obviously, is always his physicals, but his technical ability is insane. I don't think we've ever looked at his progress graph, but I bet you it's absolutely gorgeous. Look at the state of that. Up 6 in composure, 6 in free kick taking, weirdly. 6 in penalties as well, odd. His set piece stuff has improved massively. Even his heading's gone up. He's just been brilliant. Up 5 and off the ball. His decisions are 20 out of 20. I feel like I might as well highlight Marko Sawashnig as well. You can see that he's still taking his time to get used to playing on the left-hand side of the defence too. So he's been around a bit all this season. He's still not actually played that much on the left-hand side while he's training there. So we do need to get him used to that. But I still really like him as a footballer. You can see he has maybe declined a little bit with that, but it's in time. I feel like he'll become the perfect utility man for us. I think the last player I really want to sort of draw your attention to is, once again, the guy who I believe could lead us to glory one day, Carlos Vieira. He is now basically 4th choice centre-back, which means he's almost always playing some kind of games. He's made 27 appearances this year, 21 starts, so we're really ramping that up for him as well. He's wanted by presumably big sides now. Benfica and Real Madrid, which is always a good sign, but look at that trajectory. This year has been a really good year of growth for him. He felt like he was stagnating a little bit, but this year he's stepped up. Training's been fantastic from him for the most part. His attributes are improving brilliantly. Still only 20 years old. I've also signed into a brand new contract, which obviously gave him a massive wage bump. And the main thing is it means I was able to sneak in another international cap clause. Basically, we got a 3-year contract extension in there because he's not got Brazil caps. So technically, this contract can go through till 48, which is perfect because it will allow us to really have job security as far as Carlos Vieira goes, because I think he's going to be a superstar. And you can already see that up 4 in marking, 2 in positioning, 4 in decisions as well, which is super important. His strength is improving too. Just some basic stuff going up there as well. I might try and change his plan for next year because he's really looking good in the key areas, but I think he just has to keep growing. And if he does, and he keeps reaching this potential, that'll be ideal, especially as it said he could improve significantly. Considering he's already at this kind of level, I'm curious to know what that means. That's exciting to me. The one perhaps player that you're not going to see so much of this season was Pebbles. Unfortunately, he had several injuries, got 999 minutes, and still got like 5 assists over that period and 2 goals. That was a bit of an underperformance on that side of things. I would have expected more, but the injuries didn't help. As for the Malta national team, up to 131st in the world, the biggest ranking they've had thus far in the save. Obviously, this isn't the purpose of the save. I just want to show you this guy's stuff because it's just kind of fun to keep track of. Now, they have had an interesting time, though, because they had the Nations League, and they're, of course, in Group C. Last time they didn't get relegated. They came bottom and then won the relegation playoff. This year, very different story. Managed to get 3rd in the group, 8 points, some good results in there. Beat Lithuania home and away, got draws against Cyprus and Kosovo, obviously lost to Cyprus and Kosovo too, ended up with a neutral goal difference. That's a massive step in the right direction for them, which is good to see. Same can't be said about World Cup qualifying, unfortunately. It's not going super well with them right now, with 2 defeats on the board. Now, admittedly, they obviously lost to Portugal, but only 1-0, and only 1-0 against North Macedonia. That home game against North Macedonia was crucial for them to not finish bottom, I feel like, but, you know, give them time. Now to the loan farm, which now sits at an insane, 303 players out on loan. Our squad is closing in on 400 players now. It causes the screen to lag when I click on it. When there's too many players back from their loan spells, it's mad. At one point, we did actually have 306 players on loan, but a couple came back early, and one I recalled because he wasn't playing, and I wanted to use him myself. And there's still quite a lot of players here that I feel like could do with some loans, especially Latarak, and it'd be great if we could get Al-Khamarji back out again. As far as the quality in the loan farm, it is wild. So many good quality players there out there. Lots of 3-star CA guys. At various points this season as well, Pereira's dipped into being 3.5-star CA as well, just based on form alone. Gudmundsson at Marsa, right? We need to talk about him. He's been developing incredibly. And I think there's potentially a place for him in our first team one day, because I don't think Marsa are ever going to touch European football anytime soon. He's the kind of guy that if he keeps playing like this, could easily see himself come back to this club and become a potential first team starter. It's actually crazy how good he is. No Iceland caps either, which is mental. Top goal scorer on loan was actually Santos for Figura in the second tier, but Pereira with 18 for Hamren. He got like 10 in his first 9 as well. Fleming, of course, only 17 goals this season for Roy. So, you know, not the best season from him, but he's still shaping up brilliantly. Still hasn't declared for Malta. I really hope that he does one day, but I think he's brilliant. And Rodriguez as well, with 15 goals and 7 assists for Balsan Youth. That's mad. Now, admittedly, 8 of those were penalties, but he still scored 7 from open play as well, which is incredible to me. So all in all, very, very pleased with the way the loan farm's going. You'll see that a few of them have got transfer stuff on them now, which means some of them will be leaving permanently to join their clubs this summer as well. There might be a few because of the silly report stuff that are missing, sadly. Now, from a financial standpoint, we have 160 million in the bank, and that's with us spending a lot of money. We were over 200 million at one point. We've just decided to spend some of that cash. Solid wage budget, plenty of room to bring in the new players that will be joining us in about a week and a half's time, and there will be quite a lot of those too. So we're not sure how much money we've got to work with, but we do also have, of course, the Club World Cup coming up this summer too, which is going to be fun. We got to the final last time. We were unlucky not to win the whole thing. I'm excited to see how that's going to go with our new tactical setup. So the aim for season 19 is just to get back on firing. We want to be good. We want the others to be better. Hopefully Zabar will be better in conjunction with the others, because it's about bloody time that they did that. And I'll see you guys in the next one. So like, subscribe, join us over and stream. The Euros are on. It's a blessed day. Hopefully it's a lovely Sunday morning for everybody. And I'll see you guys very, very soon. Hold your gun. Capybara. Bye-bye.